Hello and welcome to this deep dive in Lifecycle services, where you will learn a bit about Lifecycle services and how you can benefit from it in your organizations. Please, if you have any questions, add them to the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. This event is also recorded and you will be sending the recording tomorrow. We'll start by introducing your experts today. My name is Brian Holmberg, and I'm a team lead and senior software architect here at Solita. For the last 3 years, I've been working out of our Aalborg office, and I've been the manager of our lifecycle services team here in Aalborg. And I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of both public and private customers. Before my time at Solita, I've had more than 20 years experience with applications management and application modernization in the retail space and in the media space. Over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone. My name is Marianne Pike. I am the Senior Vice President of our Lifecycle Services business unit here in Solita, Denmark. It is a role I've been possessing for the past 2 years. Prior to that, I was heading up a similar role as Brian, leading my own team within Lifecycle Services. So for Solita, it amounts to a total of 5 years of experience, solely focusing on Lifecycle Services for our clients and their business critical applications. I, like Brian, has also roughly 20 years of experience from software development, mainly in the financial sector, but the last 10 years or so also in consultancy, working for many both private and public sectors. Today we will go through this agenda. We will briefly present ourselves as Solita, who we are and what we do. We will then go into talking about Lifecycle Services, what it is and who it's for, where afterwards Brian will talk about how one will transition into a structured lifecycle service management. And finally, we'll present a few different cases on how we have applied lifecycle services to our clients. At Solita, we are an international consultancy company within software development, data management, and AI. We are present in 9 Northern European countries, spanning 30 different cities, and with a solid 2,100 plus employees internationally. We were founded in 1996 and have had a significant yearly growth around the 20% pro anno, and today spanning a turnover of 230 million euros. We are present in, as I mentioned earlier, many different public and private sectors, where we are also heavy on our tech cooperation with many of the large tech providers of this world. Now going into talking about what lifecycle service is and how we are defining it. When you look at a system or a solution's life cycle, the lifecycle service part spans everything from planning and preparing a solution into designing and developing the system, launching it, applying it to the businesses or citizens it is intended for, when it will transform into a sort of an iterative cycle around scaling the usage and applicability of the application, while simultaneously maturing it, keeping it secured and updated. And this can go on for many, many years, which we will come back to examples of, until at some point the application or the system will reach an end of life, which is also often a very lengthy phase when the application system needs to be taken over by a new system, and you will often experience systems staying in the end of life phase for many, many years until a substitute is matured enough for product launch. When considering entering into a lifecycle service, you can look upon it as a service catalog of things that needs to be considered. Firstly, how wide is the lifecycle services to span? Should it cover operations of application level only? Should it be on the infrastructure level of potentially a cloud on-premise situation? What is the business need for hotline availability? Are we talking 24/7 or business hours only? The availability of on-site, or the possibility for on-site availability, is that also of business critical, a situation where maybe there are security considerations that prohibits any external login to this system, and so on and so forth. The need for support is also a serious consideration. Are we talking second or third level support? Where does your users interact with this, and how are the interactions supposed to happen between end users and your first, second, and third level support? What needs for proactive handling is requested from this system? Would you need proactive handling on alerts and application monitoring? Would there be a need for technical upgrade monitoring, where the system's third-party libraries and components are being monitored for critical or even non-critical major minor releases and versions? Is there a need for a proactive and strategic roadmap development and consultancy on where this solution should evolve from a technical but also business functionality wise? These are all sorts of services that could be considered more or less needed or wanted when considering a lifecycle service. And at the core of this service, there's of course the whole side of source code handling, backup, retention periods, automation possibilities with continuous integration, continuous deployment. What are the possibilities? What is needed and wanted? And what is your cost benefit in investing in more automation or manual handling? Then there's also the levels of documentation handling as well as knowledge management, which should be a seamless integrated process into the core service that you would be requesting from a potential supplier of your lifecycle services. All in all of these services should flow into a seamless development process where the same team is capable and have knowledge and technical skills to also do further development activities on this solution. And of course, all of these development activities should be handled in a structured change management process. When looking at the service pyramid, at the bottom, we look at the infrastructure service, which considers all levels of managing and upkeeping your technical infrastructure, whether it be an on-premise solution or cloud-based solution. Some best practices are monitoring to keep your infrastructure evergreen, do cost surveillance of potential optimizations in your cost utilization, considering your security aspects, of course, security and compliance aspect of your infrastructure, maintaining and monitoring the network and the traffic over your network, and making sure your network configuration is always up to date and living up to your security and compliance standards, as well as also doing a structured change management and end-to-end monitoring of all services on this level. At the medium level in this pyramid, you are looking at the application management side. This is the technicalities of your system or application level, where you're again looking into a structured change management and ITIL-oriented incident problem management, handling incidents in a structured and timely manner, living up to agreed service level agreements, as well as meeting your expectations for timely incident handling. As mentioned earlier, there's considerations of your third and seventh level support levels, as well as application monitoring and a potential supplier coordination when you have more suppliers involved in the same system landscape. You can also consider utilizing that service of outsourcing your supplier coordination. And at the very top level, we're looking in at the level of maturing and scaling your application, as mentioned earlier, in major development activities. Now, if you're wondering how the cost sides of such a lifecycle service look, we are dividing the activities into the initial investment costs of a system. Of course, the baseline then after a hypercare phase and a development and deployment phase are your infrastructure, your operation, the cost to operate. On top of that, you will see the cost of maintenance, which is also a fairly small and with a fairly small variability. These activities are often fairly predictable and can be scaled accordingly to ambition. And on top of that, you see the spikes, the brown part, that are the spikes of development activity, being small or major releases or ambitions for this system. You have the possibility to scale your efforts according to your needs. Now, if we want to talk more about who Lifecycle Service is for, I have brought a couple of examples of common situations we see when the need for a lifecycle service arises. One situation is in a company where for one or another reason there has been some scaling down. You could potentially end up in a situation with only one person left who has skills and knowledge about your system, and hence your ability to handle unforeseen incidents is impaired by this one person's availability or presence. And in times of vacation or other absences, this person or the ability to handle the application and incidents are impaired and subpar. Another situation that could be considered is when an application has been developed in-house or by a vendor, a supplier that has handled all the application, the initial development. You would be in a situation where you want to free up these developers for new strategic development activities. However, they are the only ones with experience and knowledge about your business and this system and how it works. And hence they are sort of stuck in your in the maintenance and upkeep and operations of the system, and the ability to work efficiently on new strategic development activities are impaired by this constraint of also taking the responsibility of their former development project, which has now become a business critical application. With application management, you would gain not only a team with skills and knowledge to manage your hotline, but you would also gain the ability to tap into a technical skill pool to ramp up and down seamlessly as your development needs are being evolved and matured, and you have a wish to execute timely on new development activities. Now, next up, we will talk about the transition of an application or a system from one team to another, and I will hand the words back to Brian.
Thank you, Marianne. And first off, I'll start by apologizing that my camera is not working at the moment. So I'll try to see if I can get it working during this presentation. But for now, you'll have to hear my voice only. But yeah, transition of an application from one team to another. Basically, it's very seldom that an application stays with the same team or the same group of people throughout its life cycle. So a lot of the time, one team or one group of people are developing the application, and then at some point of time, it's transitioning into another team, or some other people are changing on the team. So basically, you have some things to consider about how to go about this transition of the application. And here we have some of the things you need to consider. And if we start by the documentation, it's very important that your application is well documented. But very few developers actually enjoy writing documentation. So it's quite often that we see a lack of documentation or subpar documentation of the applications. And sometimes the documentation is written as an afterthought when it's needed at the end of a transition. Whereas it's much easier if the documentation is maintained during the development of the application and on a daily basis, more or less. The next thing to consider is how to transition or how to share the source code. We have seen a lot of different ways to maintain source code and the versioning and so on and so forth. And maybe you want to move your source code from one source control system to another when you're transitioning your application from one team to another. And these teams could be another internal team, it could be an external team, it could also be a transition from one one external team to another external team. The third thing you need to consider is, of course, the costs, and the costs consider of many things. You have costs with the hosting. This is true for both cloud hosting and on-premises hosting. You have licensing. If you have some licenses that are used in your application, you need to consider the costs of them, who is going to pay for them, who are maintaining them. who are renewing them. And then, of course, you have the cost of the team itself. How many people are you going to have on this application? And then the fourth thing is the hotline support. As Marianne mentioned earlier, you need to consider the business criticality of your application, and what are the hotline demands or needs of this application. Is it fine that it's only during business hours that you are able to reach someone who is able to make changes or fixing the application, or do you need 24/7, 365 hotline support? Then the next thing is what we call the service coverage. It's basically how many people know about this application and are able to fix it or make changes to it. This is mainly because people need vacation, people sometimes get sick. So you need to have the coverage to make sure that you are covered in the time slots that you need to be covered. The next thing is knowledge transfer. And this is actually quite important as well, because you have, of course, the documentation as mentioned earlier, but also as mentioned earlier, the documentation doesn't always cover every possibility or all parts of the system. And a lot of the time, you also have some knowledge that is not documented because that's people just do it in one way or another. And a lot of the time, it could be something like, how do you test it? How do you deploy it to your test environments? How do you deploy it to your production environments? Are there some things you need to be aware of? And are you able to transfer the knowledge from the existing team to your new team? Then the next part is access. And actually, this is some parts that could take, I've seen it take a lot longer than expected. So basically, the new developers and users of the system or the application needs to have the accesses so that they can maintain the application. This is access to the hosting environment. It could be access to resources and licenses. So that is a very important part to be mindful about. And then, of course, we have the processes. And this is something you need to be very clear about. What are the processes in place with this application? How do we want to test it? How do we want to address bugs and service outages? How do we want to have your change management managed, and so on and so forth? So there are a lot of things to consider when you transition an application from one team to another. And to help the process along, you might use a proven process in your organization. And this is just an example of such a process. You could start with some analysis of the application, gather some basic information, make a timetable of when you want this transition to happen, and define some service level agreements and KPIs for the application to make sure that you meet the business needs as well. Then we have the transition in itself. You have a lot of access configuration to make sure that everyone have the accesses that they need. You have to transfer the documentation from, maybe it's from one system to another system. Then you have to have access to the source control. You could do an internal technical review of the application or the system to make sure that you know what's up and down in the application, what's good and what's not so good. Then you could have a handover workshop with the customer or the users of the system, and possibly also the former team. Then you could set up some development and test environments, set up some transfer of issue and task tracking to make sure that you can manage any change requests and bugs coming in. And then you can implement a build and deployment of the application into the production environment to make sure that you have all the accesses and the knowledge you need to be able to do that. And then you go into the application management, where you can set up some roadmap for what's to come. You can set up some meetings where you agree on the KPIs that you need to be reporting upon. And then you can set up some automatic check of automatic build and automatic testing. And then, of course, you can also add some support for third-party checks, like OWASP dependency check. And then, of course, if you have this proven process, it will be easier to transition your application from one system to another. Next up, we'll go through some cases, and Marianne will start with this first one, the big one.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So for this presentation of an example of a big system where we are covering the entire pyramid, so to speak, from infrastructure to application to major development activities, I have chosen an application for the Danish pension market. And just to put it into a bit of context of what I was talking about earlier, this is an application that is in the scale and mature parts of a life cycle, where the usage and the functionality of the application is iteratively further expanded and evolved alongside a maturation of the system into new security standards, new compliance rules, and so on. And these activities go hand in hand, and that's why I personally consider that as an iterative process where these things are scaled and matured simultaneously. What I'm talking about is the Danish sector-wide pensionsinfo, which is a solution for collecting pension fund information for individuals to provide them with an overview of their collected pension savings and life insurance policies. It was a system that was invented, so to speak, 25 years ago, as a small collaboration between a few private pension funds as well as a state-owned pension fund. But it has grown significantly over the years to cover around 100 pension funds and banks in a collaboration where they all provide the individuals or citizens of Denmark with an overview of their collected pension saving and life insurance information. Today, it has scaled to 40 million unique users with more than 7 million yearly logins. And the service that we are providing on this solution is stems back from the remodeling or remodernization of the application to be cloud available, cloud ready back in 2019, 2020, when it became the first Danish system to be under the scrutiny of the Danish Financial Supervisory Authority, allowing a system to go into the cloud, which was a huge win for the entire financial sector to be able to benchmark against this first cloud-based financial solution. Since launch, as I mentioned, we've been taking responsibility for the entire service pyramid from infrastructure to application level and major development, and have had major new releases on adding 30 times as much volume of data to the application, presenting that in a manner to the user where it provides an easy overview. Where in this process we also rebuild the entire front end to a more modern front end framework, and to this day, this system is a modern platform with the highest standard of security measurements, and it's being managed at a low cost and with the response times that are highest in class. Now we will continue to talk about a small solution.
Yes, thank you, Marianne. Yes, and this is one of our smaller solutions. It's not. It's smaller in scale and in impact. And this is actually also an application that is moving into its end of life phase as an application. And what are we talking about? We are talking about a suntan franchise software solution. This is basically, there are two components to this solution. There is a physical component or some software that are installed on some physical components that are in the suntan centers. So within or outside of each booth with each suntan bed, there is a couple of screens for commercial. There's one commercial screen that are showing your offers and commercials, and then there's the control and purchase screen where you can add money to your account and you can choose how much sun you want to have. And then there's also some hardware control software on these physical units that controls the suntan bed, turns on and turns off the light. That is one part of the solution. And then there's the second part of the solution, which is running in the cloud, where there are some administrative dashboards and some franchise administration, so that the franchise takers can see how their centers are performing and how well they're doing. Yes. And if we think about the service pyramid from earlier, we have the infrastructure responsibility, it's in the cloud, and we have the application maintenance part in the middle. And if you look at the picture on the right here, we have the test setup of this physical unit that are installed at the suntan centers. So this test setup was shipped to us, to our offices, on a pallet. So it's a bit different from many of our other solutions that are mainly or purely software solutions, where have this physical component as well. The reason for the transition in this case was that the franchise had a freelance developer, and this freelance developer wanted to stop. So we had 3 weeks of knowledge sharing before this freelance developer stopped working on the product, and we had to take over support and maintenance and further development on the application. As mentioned earlier, not all developers like writing documentation, and this was one of these cases where the documentation on this application was very limited, which also made the transition a lot longer because there were a lot of trial and error finding out how the system worked, especially because the limited documentation and the short time period of knowledge sharing. And then we had this physical hardware setup, which is also a bit out of the ordinary for us. And as mentioned earlier as well, we had this admin website that was hosted in Azure that we needed to acquaint ourselves with as well. So since the transition, we have maintained and further developed on this application. So this means that there have been daily maintenance and optimizations For example, the usage in the cloud has been optimized so that it's a bit cheaper than it was before. We have enhanced the quality of the documentation immensely. This is both for our own sake, but also for the customer's sake in the future, so that the application is being documented on a daily basis or regularly. There has also been added new features during the last couple of years, and there have been some integrations that had to be updated as well. For example, mobile pay had a big update last year that needed us to update all that integration as well. And one of the reasons why I put this application in the end of life phase is that the hardware in the physical units is actually a constraint because the way the software is written today uh, needs certain versions of hardware, and these versions of hardware is out of production. So basically, there's a time limit on how long the system can be maintained. So as a proof of concept, we have been doing a modernization project where we have shown that the software can be written in a way that it's not dependent on a particular version of the hardware. So this is a project that we are working on with the customer at the moment. So basically, when that project starts, we are moving into the first part of the life cycle of this application, where we are building a new version that will take over for this old one. The next case is a case where we have many solutions. This is not just one solution, but it's a framework agreement where we have the 25 different solutions that we are supporting. And because of the number of applications that we are supporting, they are in different phases of their life cycle. So we have some applications that are scaling. We have some applications that are mature products and just trucking along. And we have some applications that have reached their end of life as well. And we are looking at the Danish Environmental Protection Agency or their corporate websites. It's called corporate web, but it's actually not a single corporate website. It's 25 different smaller applications. Some of these applications are just used internally in the EPA, and some of them are also public facing for citizens and users outside of the EPA. It's a mixed bag of technologies. Some of these applications are 25 years old, and some of them are newer, which means that we have a great range of technologies that we need to support in this agreement. And as said, it's a flexible agreement where it's possible to add and remove applications within the application, or within the agreement. We also had a transition on this project as well, and the case was a bit similar to the previous case, the small case, where except this was an internal developer who was the last person in the EPA that had any knowledge of these applications, and he was stopping as well. So we also had a fairly limited time window to get knowledge out of him before he stopped. This is an on-premises hosted complex and very complex access management solution, which means that it took a long time to get all the right access management on track. So basically, we had some developers that were able to work on some of the applications, but not all of them, until 6 months after the transition started. Within this framework agreement, we have 3 different levels of service level agreement, which basically means that on the lowest level, we don't have any service level agreement as such. We just have to help them as good as possible, and this is mainly because it's applications that have very low criticality, and in some cases it's applications where we don't even have access to the source code, which makes it a bit challenging. On the second level, it's more critical applications, and we have a longer SLA, or service level agreement. So within 10 days, we have to get it up and running again. And then we have the first level where it's within 2 days, we have to get the application up and running again if something happens. And as mentioned before, it's a big mix of technologies. So we have some of the old applications that is ASP Classic, and up to ASP.NET 4.8. Since then, some of the applications have been modernized and are running on newer versions of ASP as well. And this actually the same case with the documentation was true in this case, where a lot of documentation had to be created because it didn't exist before we took over on this application or this framework of applications. So since we took over Lifecycle services on these applications, we have actually been closing down some of them. We have been closing down 6 applications that have reached their end of lives, but also at the same time we have added 5 new applications that they wanted us to maintain as well. So this is actually a framework agreement that I really like, because it makes it very easy both for us as a supplier, but also for the EPA as a customer to remove applications and add new applications to the agreement without having to go back and renegotiate the contracts. That makes it all a lot easier. We have also been streamlining the solutions with new test environments and been modernizing a select few of these applications. Yes, and now we have come to the conclusion. So what have we talked about today? We have talked about what Lifecycle services is. We have talked about how one can benefit from Lifecycle services. And we have talked about how to get a good start with Lifecycle services. And then last but not least, we have also shown you some different cases that demonstrate the width of Lifecycle services, from the big systems to the small systems, and a framework agreement with a lot of systems. And now we are coming to the sales part of the presentation. So basically, we here at Solita, we have a lot of years experience with Lifecycle services and application modernization. So basically, if you are sitting out there now and you have some applications and you want to hear more about how we could help you, for example, with the Lifecycle services or anything else, you can reach out to your local sales representative. And if you don't have a sales representative, you're welcome to visit solita.fi, where you can find your local sales representative, or read more about all our great services. And now it's time for questions. I've seen that we have already gotten some questions in the chat. So I'll start by reading some of them and answering them, and then you are more than welcome to add more questions to the chat if you have any. So the first question here from Johanna: how many developers do you think are typically needed on an application to support it? Do you want to answer this one, Marianne?
Yes, thank you. I'd be happy to. Well, first off, I almost wanna say, well, that depends, but generally, I would say as a minimum, we shouldn't go below 3 knowledge holders of this application who has knowledge, insight, access of the system to handle any incidents. And the reason for that is that will leave you with still the ability for one person to be on vacation and another one to have unplanned absence. And you would still have a presence for this application. The reason why I said it depends is circling a little bit back to what I said about scalability. If there is a generally high level of activity on this system, maybe then the 3 people is not even enough. From a utilization perspective, you could consider having many more, but from the minimum perspective, even when you do consider having a minimum of 3 developers, that doesn't necessarily mean that these 3 developers are fully allocated and fully focusing on this one solution. You could also just consider it's a minimum of knowledge holders, and then the activity around it is still scalable amongst those 3, potentially more.
Great. Thank you, Marianne. We have another great question here from Satu. How would you recommend preparing for support and maintenance phase during the initial project? Should I take this one, Marianne?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when you are developing a new application, it's very important that you start thinking about how you want to maintain it going forward. So basically, I would say that start thinking about what level of support you want and how you want to maintain it going forward. And it's also very important to start getting if it's the same team you want to have to maintain it and support it going forward, then you have the knowledge in that team already. So that's just fine. But if you are thinking about transitioning the application from the development team to a support team or a lifecycle team, it's important that you get the people that needs to maintain and support it going forward in on the ground floor, basically, so that they get some knowledge during the development of the application and not just as an afterthought at the end of the development. So you're preparing yourself in the best way possible. I hope that answered the question.
Right. So if I could just add to this, Brian, you talked a bit about the staffing side, which is a very good consideration to have already in the planning and development phase of a project. And generally, I think what is sometimes neglected in all new development sites are the quality aspect of your application. The more you have thought about the quality that it needs to live up to, sometimes also referred to as non-functional requirements, the better you are placed when it comes to then also operating and maintaining your application. So it's really on levels of how is your code structured? How maintainable is it? How have you considered building monitoring and logging into your application? Without any of these considerations, you are in for a steep learning once the application has passed its product launch and has gone into the maturation and scalability phases of its life cycle.
Great points, Marianne. Thank you. And we have another question here from Jesper. One more question. Anything in particular I or we should be aware of during a transition from one team to another? And I would say that one of some of the things that have surprised me the most, I would say, is how long it takes to get people the right access sometimes. Depending on your hosting setup and who is controlling the access to your environments, it can take surprisingly long time to get these accesses right. And that is just something that you need to consider as well, to make sure that you have a setup and some procedures in place that makes it easy to give people the right accesses in a hurry. Also, if you need to change people on the team, it's important that you can do that very fast instead of having to wait for weeks or months before a new person can be onboarded onto a project. That is one of the things that I have been most surprised about, because you would think that shouldn't take that long. Yes. And I can see Ninda has written something about.
Yeah, that's not a question. That's just a comment.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, are there any more questions? Well, if not, then I'll just, of course, first apologize for my failing camera. I hope you enjoyed the sound of my voice instead. And then I'll just say thank you for your time and have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.